Welcome back. This is another episode of The Garden Path. I'm Christine Paxia, and today you're in for a treat. Hidden in plain sight, just minutes away from the Blue Hill ski area, is an estate once owned by the Cabot family called the Eleanor Cabot Bradley Estate. It's now part of the trustees of the reservation. We're sitting on hundreds of acres of property that was once prime hunting grounds for the wealthy in the early 1900s, is now a beautiful haven of trees, gardens, and grounds. So today we'll be meeting with Jeff Thompson, horticulturist here, and he's going to give us a tour of the gardens, show us the property, and tell us a little bit about the history. And there's even a pub involved. Okay, now we're here with Jeff Thompson of the trustees of the reservation at the Eleanor Cabot Bradley Estate. And thank you for joining us today,
you're welcome.
Jeff.
Glad to be here.
I can't wait to hear and see what you have in store for this little tour of the estate, the property, the gardens, and a little bit of the history. So let's walk and tell me a little bit about the house, the
Sure.
estate, and how it came to be.
Okay, thank you, Christine. The estate was designed and laid out by Charles Platt in 1902 for the Cabot family, which was a prominent Boston family. And prior to that, this area had been used as a sporting refuge for kind of the Boston elite. So there was a tavern on the site, and the gentlemen used to come out here and do hunting and fishing on this property. When the Cabots bought the property, they later moved the tavern across the street, and you can still see it. It's this wonderful house across Route 138. And it's still there. It's a private residence now, so no one can go there and get grogs of beer, but too bad, right? But the house was built in 1902, and it's a Georgian type brick mansion that has a very classical look to it. The architect was also a landscape architect, which is very important when you consider the property and the site that this sits on. It was originally 300 acres, but when Route 128 was built, they seized by eminent domain about 200 of the acres, so now we're down to about 90 acres. There are some really fascinating parts about the house and the design of the house, which I can share with you later. But right now I'd like to show you how Platt moved on and used his landscape architecture to site the house and to make this whole experience of what this estate is.
Okay, let's go.
Okay, so now we're on the north lawn, and what we can see from here is this wonderful vista off to the Blue Hills. And at the time that the house was built, you can imagine there were not as many trees. So what you would have seen would have been a clear and unobstructed view of this wonderful vista off to this way. Also, too, Platt designed and built a man-made pond at the bottom of this hill, and he also did what was new to American landscape, was forming land to serve a purpose of creating a specialized vista. So Platt created a new foreground interest for this property so that when you sat in the house or looked out of the house, you have these wonderful little vignettes of these pastoral scenes. The trustees still brings livestock into these properties, and so we have sheep here all summer as well as llamas. It's a real take for all the people who visit. Then in the back, heading to the west, there was an alley created, cut through the original forest to show the view of the Neponset River Valley and the tiered hills that rise off into the distance. So, great example of how this early age of American landscape design was happening here on this property. And this property, as well as a number of the other trustees' properties, are kind of iconic examples of that. We're lucky to have them. Yeah, they are, aren't they?
And they're right in our backyard.
That's right.
Minutes from Milton.
Yeah, you know, we're 16 miles from Boston. We're right off Route 128. It's very easy to get to, and we're open to the public. 24/7.
In the 1900s to get here from Boston by pony.
I have no idea, but they used to ride horses all over this property. Again, when it was such a large estate of 300 acres or more, there are amazing bridle trails that are used by dog walkers and walkers, as well as snowshoes and cross-country skiing in the wintertime. So a real treat for people who like to get out and walk the trails and be out in nature.
And that's open to the public?
Open to the public. We're open every day of the year, and it's free. No charge to come and use this property.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Now this used to be a hunting lodge or a hunting facility?
It was, years and years ago, there was sportsmen societies and groups that utilized the land for hunting and fishing. I'm not sure when that all went away, but when the turn of the century and the Cabots bought the place, they commandeered the land as their own personal property. And basically they developed the land to be somewhat of a gentleman's farm, very self-sufficient, grew all their own livestock and food. And if you look off to the north here, you can see fields. Many of these were used just for livestock, but the whole upper portion of the property where the soil was less rocky and well drained, they grew all kinds of commercial vegetables, things that they could sell, trade, or consume themselves. So a lot of agrarian history here, a lot of horticulture history. Eleanor was actually the first woman to graduate from Radcliffe College with a landscape architecture degree. So there's this history, real horticulture endeavor here.
I can't wait to see Eleanor's gems that you have tucked away.
Yeah, we have a number of really interesting things on the property that kind of demonstrate her love of horticulture. One of them is the formal garden, and then she has a whole greenhouse facility on the other side of the property that includes a kitchen garden and a pit house that houses 70-year-old camellias.
Oh, can't wait to see it, but let's go take a look at the formal gardens.
Let's go look. So Christine, this is another big part of the designed landscape of the Bradley estate. This garden is actually an extremely formal part of the overall design of the house and the site itself. As you look around, it's laid out quite like an Italian formal garden. It's got a basket weave wall along the edge, and it has all these magnificent mature plantings from probably the 40s and the 50s.
Well, it's so beautiful. Let's go take a closer look.
Okay. So some of the interesting parts about this are the actual symmetry of it and the way that it was laid out. There's a fountain here, and we have a lot of architectural reference photographs at our resource center that show us basically what this garden looked like when the Cabots and the Bradleys were here. So the garden is in need of a big restoration, and right now we're trying to put together some ideas and thoughts, as well as to raise the capital to do the brick wall over again. It's in pretty bad disrepair and it's kind of falling apart. But the plan will involve not just the wall, but new plantings and infrastructural things like irrigation and resetting the ways that the people move through the gardens, as well as some landscape lighting. Right now we have some temporary lighting in here because we're having a holiday show. It starts in December and runs the whole month of September. We set the price for that really low, so it's $5 a head to come here, and we have really, really big plans for it. So there will be tree trimming, there will be Mrs. Claus, there will be a young professional night, and a bunch of other features that we're going to put on involving music and storytelling and reading. So
if somebody wanted to come to one of those events, what would they need to do? Do they call? Or?
No, you can go on our website and Google in the Eleanor Cabot Bradley Estate, and the entire schedule will be laid out on the website.
Great.
If you can't find that, you can always call the trustees personally and get the information from them.
Okay, so that's the Eleanor Cabot Bradley Estate.com. .com or .org?
You can just really go to the Trustees of Reservations website. It's TTOR. If you Google TTOR, you'll find it right away. They have a really good presence on the web. So, yeah, so as we walk through this, the mature plantings and trees were actually really part of the design and layout of this garden.
So what would this garden have been used for? Because you've got some open space, you've got the formal beds, you've got the walls, and it goes right up to that gorgeous home.
The lawn area, the infield of the garden here was probably used for recreation. Things like, you know, badminton and croquet and bocce and things like that, as well as just the visual aspect of having this wonderful flat green space that leads to the alley that finally goes all the way out to the Neponset River Valley. So as far as the visuality of it, that was probably the key important part of it. As we have seen in photo documentation, the center of this space was always left as grass. There were no formal garden spaces or hedges or anything involved with it. And that's an important thing when we start to think about our spirit of place, what we call our spirit of place on these properties. And what we need to do is we need to show the public what these places were and how they were historically, and try and keep it as accurate in telling the story as we can. So
it's still beautiful.
It is beautiful. It's quite a garden, and there are many more elements on this property. Little vignettes of gardens all over the property. We're only going to see a number of them today. We won't see all of them. Okay. But lower on the property, if you take a little walk, there's an Asian-themed garden that we call the Dell. And there's also a double-walled stone wall that runs up from the Dell that has an amazing collection of deciduous azaleas that Eleanor planted herself. So really good time to come and see them is late May, early June. The whole cow lane, as we call it, is just full of color and beautiful flowers. So.
I'll definitely come back and hopefully see the farmer in the Dell.
Absolutely. There's another garden that heads this way. It's linked into the rhododendron walk. There's an interesting collection of rhododendron species that we're going to be improving over the next 5 or 10 years. And it leads right out into the kitchen garden where this family did a lot of sustainable agriculture. They grew their own food, they had their own chickens, they had their own milk and beef cattle, as well as pigs and other things that they grew on this farm. So
let's go take a look.
Yeah, let's go take a look. Hi, welcome back. Jeff Thompson again, horticulturist for the Trustees of Reservations at the Bradley Estate. And they caught me out in the garden working, and they figured I might give you a little tip about preserving canna lilies through the winter. As you can see, these plants have been badly frosted, and it is actually a tropical plant. So you cannot leave these in the ground all winter. They'll freeze and turn into mush. So the tops can freeze pretty well without damaging any of the roots. And what I'm going to do today is I'm going to show you how to dig them out and break them up, and give you some advice about storing them. So basically you want to wait until the plants have pretty much expired due to frost. If you dig them too early, or if you wanted to dig them early, you could do that and just cut them back really hard. The idea with these plants is to try and get all of the root mass that you can. So you can see there's still a lot of soil on these plants, and you can see the actual container where I planted it from. You'll take the plants after you shake off a good deal of the soil, and what you'll see is at the very bottom there will be these tubers that have little sprouts coming out of them, as well as the roots from this past season. These are what you're going to save. The whole tops are basically worthless to us, and they would actually brown out and die and go away. So after you take them out of the ground, you'll want to break them into smaller pieces, and each one of these will actually form a clump the same size as the one I'm holding right now. So as you break them down, you'll find you get 4 or 5 clumps with each one. And then you want to take them and you want to cut the tops off. and dispose of the tops. And then these will want to be stored somewhere where they don't freeze and in a dry, dark location. Probably the best temperature would be somewhere between 40 and 50 degrees. If you keep them out of the dark and you keep them from freezing, in the following spring you could take this plant and plant it, and it will actually form a clump this size next year. So Christine, here we are at the kitchen garden, and again it's a formal walled garden. The walls were built probably to keep out you know, the pest species, things like deer and groundhogs and all that stuff. And the family used this primarily as a place to grow cut flowers and vegetables to supply the house with food. The tale goes that Eleanor had Thanksgiving dinner here every year, and everything on the table had to come from the farm. So as you can imagine, the size of this garden, the shape of it, it could provide quite a bit of food for the family. Its role has changed in recent years. You can see we have some blueberries and some blackberries here. They're not necessarily going to be part of the garden for much longer. And this year what we did was just grow vegetables. A big portion of this garden was used for cut flowers in the past. So here again we see Eleanor's desire to have fresh flowers and plants all around her as a horticulturist.
How large is the space?
Geez, that's a good question. I would say it's probably getting close to maybe 1/10 of an acre, maybe a little bit more. It's a big space. Each quadrant had its own little purpose. There was a fruit orchard on this side over here, which we just recently took out and have started replacing with new and different species. We did leave one of the large apple trees, and you can see most of these vegetables have gotten frosted. It's late in the year, but literally hundreds and hundreds of pounds of vegetables came out of this garden, and we donated a lot to the local food shelters. And we also sold some of it at a little farm stand that we put out in the parking lot. So in the summertime, you can expect to see some fresh produce out in the...
That's good to know.
Yeah. So there's not a lot left. On the side that we're looking at right now, we have Brussels sprouts, broccoli, and collard greens.
Is this garlic?
That's actually leeks. We grew leeks from seed this year.
That lets the drips in.
That's right. And we did plant garlic this year, so we planted about 10 pounds of garlic, and we'll be trying to sell it next year as well. Some of the garden can be used to create revenue. I could never eat all this myself, and I bribe enough people with the vegetables to bring them back again, but this year there was just so much food coming out of this garden that we saw the need to sell it.
It's still producing, and if you ate all of it, you'd turn green, and we'd call you Kermit.
That's right. But yeah, so the next year or two, this space over here where all these vegetables are, the trustees would like me to start a small nursery here and be able to propagate some plant material with the two greenhouse structures that we have, as you see right up here. There will be a rebuilding of the cold frames, and we will have a much more efficient way to do horticulture here on the property.
Oh, it's so impressive.
Careful, very hot.
So I wouldn't want to eat this?
No, not unless you like hot food.
That's what to do to somebody you don't like. Here,
That's
have a bite.
Right. Yeah, but yeah, let's take you over. I'll show you where the other parts of this facility that were related to growing everything for this property, as well as her own personal desire to have some really exotic plants in a place where they don't really grow.
Okay.
Okay.
Let's go.
Okay, Christine, so here we are. We're at the greenhouse section of the property, and this was a very important part of the property, considering that they grew all their food here themselves. This greenhouse here is basically a production type greenhouse where they could grow seedlings and possibly overwinter plants through the winter. It is heated, and what you see here is what's called a pit house.
Oh.
And originally did have heat, but no longer has heat. and it contains 3 70-year-old camellias.
Oh, that's exciting.
It's very exciting, and you don't see too many of these very often. It takes advantage of the geothermal of being down that low below the frost line, and then the sunlight comes in and warms them. Now, camellias don't grow in this area. They're more native to the South, like South Carolina and south into Florida and southern states. But the interesting thing about why they're here is that Eleanor loved cut flowers. And these bloom from February through April. So if you're ever by the Cabot estate and you just want to stop by and see some flowers, stop by and brush the snow off the windows and take a peek down inside, and you'll see these magnificent.
In February?
February, March, and April.
Can I bring my scissors?
You can bring your scissors.
Okay.
Do you want to take a walk and go down
go.
inside? Okay, let's do that.
Well, here we are making a quick pit stop, looking at this 70-year-old camellia collection, which is amazing because, as you mentioned, camellias were not readily available in New England. They're more of a warm weather plant, and to be able to grow these, you needed a hothouse or a pit, as you called it.
Yeah, and you know, it really shows how interested these people were in horticulture. You know, the plants themselves, when I got here, needed a lot of work, but we're bringing them back, and we're also adding to this collection. So these will serve as a great parent for some grafting, as well as getting some containerized plants. One of the other things that the camellias can show is their utility for food crop. And camellia is actually the species that green tea comes from. So not a lot of people know that, but Camellia sinensis was actually green tea. So all the tea that you drink comes from a very similar plant to these.
No kidding.
But the flowers on these are amazing. Do come by between February and April. Probably more towards mid-March, and pure through the glass. There's 3 different varieties of just the most incredibly beautiful flowers.
What colors are they?
There's a white, which is just pure white. There's a pink, and then there's a striped white and pink. So we'll be adding to this. We're going to be working with some of the other local camellia growers to get grafting stock, as well as doing our own personal rooting in the propagation bench that we have in the other greenhouse. So this greenhouse this winter will also be used to store some of the tropical and semi-tropical plants from the other garden sites that the trustees have across the state.
Oh, looking forward to coming here with my snowshoes in the winter.
Yes.
Now I'm looking up here and I see a couple of buds.
Yeah, so right now we did prune them back very hard, but you're going to find that there's going to be buds starting to form on these plants, and then they'll go through the winter. So here's a nice big fat bud, and they kind of look a little bit like rhododendron buds. You can see them right there. And these will open up into flowers that are between 4 and 6 inches across and just absolutely beautiful.
Oh, I can't wait to see them.
They were gorgeous this year, and in spite of the fact that they were kind of poorly maintained, we're going to get them back again, and they should look wonderful.
Well, Jeff, I didn't know you had so many fine feathered friends. As you mentioned, it is a working farm, along with growing vegetables, flowers, and other things. You have
Chickens.
chickens.
Yeah, so that's an interesting part of the whole spirit of place that we're trying to create here at the trustees. Livestock was always a big part of the story here, and we're bringing it back. The chickens actually were grown by the trustees, and we brought this flock here, and they've just started to lay eggs,
Oh, they did.
which is really wonderful. Yeah, we got them in May, and it takes, 4 or 5 months or so before they start laying, but we're really happy. And then there's other parts of the quotient and the figures and how we want to work this place to bring back that kind of spirit of place, which was a gentleman's farm, really. The garden parts that I've shown you already are part of what the trustees has brought about as a public garden initiative. So we have 11 properties that we're going to be developing into these great public gardens for people to come and enjoy and visit and see all the great developments. So all of these things factor into what the trustees is trying to do here to excite these properties and get people to come in. And I think over the next 5 or 10 years, you're going to see some pretty incredible changes with places like Eleanor, Cabot, Bradley, the Ames Estate, as well as the other garden properties that are in Massachusetts here for us.
And my favorite, Naumkeag.
Yeah, Naumkeag is wonderful. We were just out there this week. The entire Hort team was planting trees and shrubs. So the restoration part of all of these projects is ongoing, and you're going to see some big changes and improvements with what's going on here. And hopefully we can get some people to come in and check it out. It's right in your neighborhood. As things keep going, you're going to see more and more.
Well, looking forward to it.
Thanks.
Thank you. Now,
Thank you.
girls, behave. There's enough for everybody.
You got their attention there, definitely. So here we are back at the driveway. I've given you a pretty good tour of the property, but I wanted to tell you a little bit about what we've been doing out here. This whole driveway entrance was badly overgrown with trees, so we've taken some of the trees out and we've actually started to plant new materials in here that are really going to make this driveway something to see. To the other side we have a great CSA farm with beehives, our own greenhouse, and a couple other outbuildings there. But I'd like to thank you for doing this and allowing me to tell you about the Bradley Estate, and I hope this has been a wonderful experience for you.
It's been wonderful. Thank you for showing us the gorgeous home, the wonderful grounds. I could picture the sheep and the goats and cows kind of grazing 100 years ago, and the vegetable gardens and the formal gardens, and I'll look forward to sneaking in the winter and with my scissors and getting some camellias.
Sounds good. Thank you so much.
Nice to see you, Jeff. Thank you.
Nice to see you too. Thanks.
And that's it for today. Tune in next week or next time for another episode of The Garden Path. If you have any questions, feel free to email at miltongardenpath@gmail.com or like us on Facebook, Milton Garden Path.